In order for your business to be able to pay for your mortgage, you have to be, scaled to a certain size. You have to sell your product for a certain size. And I think that's one of the biggest hurdles to anybody who's trying to farm close to cities is just land prices are really high. We're really lucky because we're in an active floodplain, which means nobody's been able to build or do anything here for 60 years. Or otherwise, it would be cul-de-sac communities and warehouses and strip malls.
Farming around a neighborhood, that's a tough deal. And you've probably heard that from other people. We've been fortunate enough not to have real neighbors that have had an issue with any of this, but there's people that just have horrible stories.
Trespassers, people who think they could just pick things, and also being so close to communities who may not always share our values. They have complained about dust kicking up on the roads. They've complained that our caterpillar tunnels and hoop houses are unsightly.
We don't like dust any more than you do, and there are times when we will have to be in the fields at 4 o'clock in the morning, but I can promise you, when I wake you up, I'm not any happier to be awake and working than you are to be woke up.
I always try and move large equipment like at 1 or 2 in the morning, which is kind of a really big pain, honestly, but it just makes things easier, and that's what you find yourself doing. But I think the general consensus with the public has kind of gravitated to less tolerance to most farming things, like smells, and even though most of these farms have been here way prior to any housing development.
And as far as the cultural issues, people who are feeling displaced by urbanites are often people who see us as bringing that in, although we see ourselves as preserving farmland.
Owners not wanting to sell. Maybe it's okay with them, but they're worried about how their neighbors will feel about selling to a person of color. This happens in the city as well as the farms.
The incubator program we're part of is full. And so we've maxed out at 1 acre. On 1 acre, even as we almost exclusively work on productive efficiency, we can't scale that efficiency once we feel like we know what we're doing. And the way that a lot of farmers have managed how little land there is and how land is kind of bisected into these very small parcels is that folks manage multiple farm sites. And so it's pretty realistic to think that that's the path we'll have to go down as we talk about expanding.
As we used to call it, we farmed the road. And you would have to travel to one place or another. The traffic is just astronomical here to try and get through. The vast majority of that acreage was leased acreage. We knew, number one, we were going to lose some of it, quite a bit of it, to development. We didn't want to be hung out to dry by losing that acreage to farm and losing that income. So we kind of had to be a little more proactive and make the jump to direct market. Ironically, one of the good sides of it is neighbors. We've got a built-in customer base. And when conflict comes, those neighbors are standing beside us. They want to see our operation stay put. That open space is going to be there, and they're very adamant to protect it.
How do we have the types of relationships to our markets where we can't grow enough ground cherries? There is always going to be surplus interest, surplus demand. That means that as we grow, that is an invested relationship to what we produce.
Once you start to break down the fabric of agriculture, contiguous pieces of land, farmers that operate on the urban edge are pushed to adapt and to continue to operate on smaller acreages and just really close proximity to residential communities. And if the community is not necessarily planned well for having agriculture in their community, there can be a major rub between what's going on farm and the needs and wants of a residential community. And so in regions where farming on the urban edge has remained viable or has remained an important component of the local culture, it's usually because there's been some sort of bridge between the urban population and the farmers that are operating on the urban fringe.
Finding a size, finding an appropriate scale, finding ways to work within your community and be a part of that community have been the keys for us.
We depend on every foot that we have to create income. It's a thing where it's so expensive to grow produce now.
Even when I'm doing on the bigger side of my acreage, that's a lot different than what I used to try and do with 250 acres of caneberries, which is hugely labor intensive. And grass seed's like 6 or 7 year crop. It's about half of what blackberries and raspberries and stuff are. There's some money in it, but for me, it's just to keep it farmed. If that scaled all the way back to where I lost all of my rented ground, I'd still be able to do everything I'm doing now. I'd just be doing less of it. So we'll still continue to do the direct farm marketing, vegetables, fruit, U-pick operation, which addresses a couple scarce things like labor. With the U-pick, they provide the labor, you just provide the crop. And so sometimes you have to get creative when your resources are limited. It's a change of focus from still farming the acreage, but the requirement of my attention is less to where I can focus on what I really see as the future of the farm.
We've brought a tremendous amount of development just in the hill behind us. That was all farmland that we farmed years ago. We just could not come up with enough acreage to keep the grain operation viable. Financially, you're looking at an income of about $500 an acre at best. And we took a look at strawberries where we're grossing well over $10,000 an acre. And this side of the operation was growing so rapidly that we really needed to concentrate our efforts on the direct market part of the farm. We realized early on that we needed to be more comprehensive in what we offered. People will come in to purchase peaches, but then they'll also purchase blueberries and sweet corn and stuff besides. We cannot do all of it. And we've kind of made the decision that so far we're not going to concentrate on any crops that are root crops like potatoes or carrots, or do we concentrate on any tree fruit crops. We've concentrated on the berries, the vegetables, and anything that way that can be hand harvested pretty easy. We always try to work with the local growers as much as we possibly can. It all helps to bring more customers into you and to offer more products, a wider range of products.
There also was this wave of individuals that were really wanting to support one another. Bigger farms supporting like these very small farms that maybe were on a 1/16 of an acre or something. I also have seen indigenous farmers that are all working together on the same rent the same piece of land, but they have separate businesses as a way to support a lot of individuals that did not have access to markets before, and now there are markets that are completely centered around that.
We try and build relationships with farms that kind of think the way we do, stewardship-wise and quality-wise. We grow fresh tomatoes in our greenhouses. We grow some fresh basil. Well, that's a fit. It makes perfect sense. Okay. So when a friend of ours' daughters went to cheese making school and they started making cheese, I said, hey, you make the fresh mozzarella, we want to sell it. So, and then another bakery here in the valley with local flour makes incredible bread. Okay. So we sell the bread that the bakers bake. Part of the time it's with our wheat made into flour. That's a perfect fit. It's not just like retailing something that somebody wholesaled to you. It's coming through a relationship. So you build those things that fit for more reasons than just you want to sell it.
A lot of farms on the urban edge are limited in land, and of course we are too. However, we did buy far enough out to get a little more than 20 acres of arable land, which at the amount of dollars we produce per acre, we don't even farm all of it every year. It lets us put some into just cover crop or some into just pasture. Many of the crops we grow are specific to the fact that we are near a large urban center. We're able to grow many fragile crops that would be difficult to ship, such as heirloom tomatoes or many varieties of greens and salad and that sort of thing, that the quality is very different when it's picked the day before than the week before. And so that's given us a major advantage. It's easy for basically any restaurant or almost anyone in our CSA to tell the difference between what they're getting from us and what they get in the store.
We don't really have like a main cash crop that is like all of our eggs are in that basket. Rather than like specialize in things, we have cut a few crops that we just like beat our heads against the wall for years trying to grow, people will still sign up for our CSA.
It's so farm specific. It's like your soil type, what pests are you dealing with? Like, what do you love? What are you passionate about? Because you're gonna put in that extra like 5% that makes it really great and special, and like you can sell it better because you really love it. And I do believe it has more to do with what you're passionate about than some like one magic crop. Because as our friend Dave Hedlund likes to say,
as the American farmer, we've never met a crop we couldn't overproduce and trash the market. I say that because it's really important for all of us to not get too tied up and involved in what I call a race to the bottom. It's really easy to get trapped in that faster, cheaper business model. You know, we grow 12,000 square feet of greenhouse tomatoes between 3 beefsteak varieties and about 40 heirloom and cherry varieties. You know, people ask me about that, well, you should build more greenhouses. And I say, no, we'll expand, but only when we can stay in that niche, that vine-ripened, hand-picked, remarkable fruit.
It's what you net, it's not what you grow. Sometimes, you know, bigger is smaller. And so if you can change your margins and control prices and some of these things that really affect the bottom line, then I think that's where things start to make sense.
We started growing on a half acre and we expanded to 1 acre of production. So we're growing at a small scale, like just about everybody here. We focus primarily on growing late season crops, mostly because we have a lot of early season flooding that is unique to this specific spot. And so we've had to adapt our farming technology quite a lot to that, and that also means adapting our business strategy.
We do see a lot of our peers move towards prioritizing higher value crops and also prioritizing private industry wholesale. But the reality is that some of those high value crops, which tend to be like high summer fruiting crops, don't do well in our soils.
One of the reasons that we focus on growing a CSA is that it allows us to kind of redefine the value of what we do. So when we're thinking about increasing efficiency, increasing profitability off of individual crops is less immediately important than increasing other metrics. And so because we're not thinking as much about like how much is this individual crate of tomatoes is going to get us, we're thinking a lot more about like what is going to make our members happiest, what is increasing the actual volume of produce, what is increasing soil health, how efficiently are we using our labor. And all of these other things are able to be closer to the front of our mind because we've taken that individual market value of crops off the table by having them be devoted to a CSA where people expect a wide diversity.
I mean, one, it's been very engaging to just focus on productive capacity and shoring up our systems and really building a lot of relationship and experience to the specific crops we choose to grow. So in some ways, it hasn't been the most negative thing that we're limited. But now that we're at year 5 of being a farm, we really feel that moving deeply into relationship is the thing that actually creates the conditions that we need to be nurtured by this work, to let this work be nurturing to our communities, and ultimately that all of those relations are the things that build the strongest foundation for us to scale up purposefully, for us to have the type of community support that we will require if we ever move towards purchasing land.
You know, I got into this farming really to try to help my community. You know, we saw health disparities in the Black community, economic disparities. That's, I think, why a lot of us are in it, right? Is to try to, you don't go into growing vegetables to make a lot of money, but you go into it to help your community and to have a job that you're connected with the land. It's also great to be able to grow an organization and to bring in young people and then give them responsibilities maybe separate from the actual growing. And so we've created a little bit of an economic engine here about what's going on, and it's just been a great opportunity to build that community. It grew from community gardens to larger farm spaces, and as my knowledge grew, then my knowledge of the problem grew. I think farmers of color, just like people of color in a lot of spaces in the United States, are not necessarily welcome. I think farmland in general has been at least, around here, a real white-dominated culture. I think when people of color try to move into white spaces, then they can be accepted or they cannot be accepted. And either way, it really then asks you're asking your neighbors to really extend beyond maybe where they thought they would be. Not to say that we have had negative interactions with the folks around us. I went out before we got the lease. I tried to meet a lot of farmers to see what support was out here. And a lot of folks were very encouraging about trying to get on the land. Yes, they can support, and we certainly have found that.
Most of the folks around us are here because they have enough money to buy a large amount of acreage and a large house. And sometimes those folks are very happy to have us here. They really enjoy being part of our community and seeing what we're doing. Sometimes they find it kind of an invasion of their privacy to have a bunch of people out here, or they find us to be, on the other hand, kind of too urban and bringing out a lot of people who are not rural people who didn't grow up out here. So either side of that can be trouble. Although for the most part, our neighbors are very understanding and quite wonderful folks.
Every community has specific needs and specific wants. Our community has made the decision. They're willing to be more dense and keep a clearly delineated line between farmland. Okay, well, a lot of people walk through here. That's problematic in the modern days with insurance and liability and everything. But from a sense of community standpoint, it's incredibly powerful. And those sorts of things build kind of something that's one step beyond brand loyalty. That's loyalty to each other, community loyalty, I would call it. What we're really trying to do is maintain a viable farm without losing track of who we are. And we are vegetable farmers, we're food producers. We want to do that and be proud of it. And like I say, if we may need to flex, if I'm faced with losing it in the next generation, if our kids are faced with losing it or they got to sell espresso, I think they'll sell espresso with local milk probably. But, I know, our prices are a little higher on tomatoes at the stand, and I know community members say, yeah, I'm going to pay a little more for that tomato, but I'm paying for my view. I'm paying for my quality of life. And if you can help people to understand that, it all becomes very powerful. And then all those people that could be complaining about you are more your allies, and that can be very helpful.
So there's a lot of conflict in, do we purchase more land further away, but then we're gonna have to transport and spend more money on fuel and gas and cars and reduce the amount of options we can sell to, but also be close enough that people can come visit the farm, that is also accessible to come see us in action and develop that sense of place and relationship to land. It goes both ways. I think ultimately, it's important to stay close and to expose people to what it really is to have a local food system. So a little bit of it for me is existence as resistance. So I exist as both a Sinai and I resist being extinct and all that's happened in our history as Native people, but also existence as a small farm continuing to persist in this rapidly developing space and continuing to challenge people's ideas of what farming is and where farming happens and what it actually looks like.